My wife walked into the house wearing a dress I'd never seen before, looked me straight in the face, and laughed as she told me she was going on a date. "Try not to get too jealous," she added with that icy little smile. That should have been the moment I snapped. Instead, I said one sentence that made her stop cold. What followed didn't just blow up our marriage. It uncovered things that would affect people I didn't even know existed. Some secrets are bigger than vows. Some lies wreck more than a home. My name is Francis Donahue. I'm 44. And for the last 15 years, I've run Deep Blue Adventures, a diving center off the coast of North Carolina. I built it from the ground up after leaving the Navy, teaching people how to explore the ocean, while my wife, Gloria, handled the bookkeeping. I honestly believed we had a strong marriage. 22 years of what I thought was loyalty, respect, and love. That Tuesday night shattered that illusion. I was in the garage cleaning my dive gear when I heard heels tapping across the kitchen floor. That alone was strange. Around the house, she practically lived in sneakers. When I stepped inside, I saw Gloria standing in front of the mirror, adjusting a dress I'd never seen before. Tight, black, and definitely not something you wear to a book club. "Got plans?" I asked, wiping my hands on a towel. She turned, and that's when I saw it. The smile. Not the warm, familiar one I'd known for years, but a colder, sharper version that sliced right through me. "I'm going on a date tonight," she said, as casually as if she were telling me we were low on milk. "Try not to be too jealous, Francis." The words hit me like a rogue breaker. I just stood there, towel hanging uselessly from my hand, staring at the woman I'd been married to for 22 years, while she laughed at my reaction. Not anxious, not guilty. She was amused. "A date," I finally managed to repeat. "You heard me." She grabbed her purse, checked herself in the mirror again. "Don't wait up." I wanted to demand answers. Who, where, since when? Instead, what came out of my mouth was something else entirely, and it stopped her in her tracks. "Have fun explaining that to your sister tomorrow." Her confidence cracked, just for a heartbeat. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing," I said quietly. "Enjoy your night." But it wasn't nothing. Her sister Karen lived only 3 blocks away and loved popping in without warning. More importantly, Karen had recently been poking holes in Gloria's book club story, asking why they met so often if they only read 1 book a month. After Gloria left, I sank into my recliner and stared at the wall. 22 years together, and she'd just announced she was stepping out on me like she was heading to yoga class. The worst part wasn't the cheating itself. It was how casual it all seemed to her, how disposable our life looked in her eyes. I poured myself a bourbon and started thinking. My years as a dive instructor taught me that panic underwater gets you killed. You stay calm. Evaluate the situation. Form a plan. The same rules applied now. By the time I drained the glass, I knew what I needed to do. The next morning, Gloria behaved as if the night before had never happened. She hummed while making coffee, asked if I'd checked the weather report, even kissed my cheek before I left for the dive shop. If I hadn't watched her walk out in that black dress the evening before, I might have thought I'd dreamed it all. But I'm a systematic man. 20 years in the Navy and a decade and a half running a business had trained me to keep records and pay attention. So when I got to Deep Blue Adventures, I started digging. First stop, our joint bank account. Gloria had always taken care of the money, insisting she was better with numbers. Turned out she was just better at hiding things. 3 recent cash withdrawals, $300 each. Then I checked our credit card statement, charges at restaurants I'd never set foot in, a hotel in Wilmington, and a place called Intimate Apparel Boutique. My dive certification hammered one thing into me: stay steady under pressure. But looking at those transactions felt like nitrogen narcosis, that eerie, dangerous clarity you get too deep underwater. Everything snapped into focus, and it was terrifying. I called the bank and requested detailed statements for the last 6 months. After that, I drove to the hotel in Wilmington and had a talk with the front desk clerk, a young woman named Jennifer. She recognized Gloria's photo immediately. "Oh, Mrs. Donahue," she said. "She's been here a few times with her friend Marcus. Such a nice couple." Marcus. The name hit like a depth charge. I knew exactly who she meant. Marcus Webb had been one of my dive students 3 years earlier, a 40-something real estate guy, recently divorced, constantly flirting with female clients. I'd kicked him out of the dive center after catching him taking pictures of women in wetsuits. Now he was taking pictures of my wife in hotel rooms. Back at the shop, I reached out to an old Navy buddy. Tommy Rodriguez now worked for a private investigation firm in Charlotte. We'd saved each other's lives in the Persian Gulf, so he owed me more than one favor. "Francis, man, good to hear your voice," he said when he picked up. "What's going on?" I laid it all out for him. The dress, the date, the hotel, Marcus. Tommy listened in silence, then gave me the piece of advice that would change everything. "Don't confront her yet," he said. "Cheaters are like cornered animals. They'll burn every piece of evidence and disappear. You need proof, photos, recordings, bank records. Build your case first." "This isn't a military op, Tommy," I protested. "Isn't it?" His tone hardened. "Your wife has launched a full-scale attack on your marriage, and you're the one standing there unarmed. Time to gear up." That night, I installed a small camera in our living room, not because I wanted to spy on her, but to protect myself. If she was going to blow up our marriage, she wasn't going to take my name down with it. When she came home late again, claiming book club had run long, I just nodded and asked how the discussion went. "Fascinating topic," Gloria said, avoiding my gaze. "We talked about betrayal and relationships." I almost laughed at the sheer irony. Instead, I kissed her goodnight and went to bed, where I lay awake mapping out my next steps. The following day, I'd start collecting everything I needed to tear this facade down for good. Tommy moved quicker than I expected. By Friday, he'd found something that froze my blood. Gloria wasn't just cheating. She was quietly bleeding us dry. "Francis, you'd better sit down," Tommy said over the phone. "Your wife took out a second mortgage on your dive center, $200,000 using forged documents." The room started spinning around me. "That's impossible. I never signed anything." I could barely get the words out. "She didn't pull this off alone." "Right," Tommy said. "Marcus works at Coastal Realty. They've got ties to a few mortgage brokers. Looks like someone adjusted the paperwork for her." I squeezed the phone so hard my knuckles went white. "Where's the money now?" "Gone," Tommy replied. "Transferred to an offshore account last month. Francis, they're planning to vanish." That evening, Gloria walked in loaded with shopping bags from high-end stores. New luggage, designer outfits, jewelry. There was no way she could afford on her legal salary. The same woman who once hoarded coupons was now burning through cash like it grew on trees. "Special occasion?" I asked, watching her lay out her haul like trophies. "A woman deserves nice things," Gloria said, holding up a silk dress against her body. "You've been so obsessed with your little diving business, you forgot I have needs too." My little diving business. The same operation she'd just mortgaged behind my back. "Must have cost a fortune," I said evenly. She gave a casual shrug. "We can afford it. Business has been good, hasn't it?" I wanted to slam the truth down right then and there, but Tommy's warning echoed in my head. Build the case first. So I smiled, nodded, and kept playing the clueless husband while everything I'd built was being stripped away. That night I called my attorney, Robertson Rob Chin, another old Navy buddy who'd traded uniforms for a law degree. I laid the whole situation out. His reaction was instant. "Francis, this is fraud, straight-up criminal fraud. We need to freeze your assets immediately and loop in law enforcement." "What about Gloria?" I asked quietly. "What about her?" he shot back. "She's committed multiple felonies here. Forgery, fraud, theft. This isn't a slap-on-the-wrist situation. She's staring down serious prison time." By Sunday morning, we had emergency court orders in place, freezing all our accounts and blocking any further transfers or property deals. That's when I uncovered something else I hadn't expected. Gloria's mother, Elizabeth, was completely in the dark. She called me that afternoon, her voice trembling. "Francis, Gloria mentioned moving to Florida with some new friend. She asked me to wire her $10,000 for a business opportunity. Something about it feels wrong." I told Elizabeth everything. Marcus, the affair, the stolen money, the forged mortgage. By the time I finished, she was sobbing and apologizing over and over. "I raised her better than this," Elizabeth said, devastated. "What can I do to help?" In that moment, I realized I had someone on the inside of Gloria's family who was firmly on my side. That's when my plan really started to solidify. Monday morning brought another bombshell. Tommy called with news that made my hand shake around the phone. "Francis, there's more. Gloria's been in contact with Detective Ray Morrison from Wilmington PD. They've been meeting off the record. I knew the name. Morrison had been whispered about for years. Cases where evidence mysteriously disappeared. Charges dropped after the right people got involved. You think he's dirty? I asked. I think your wife's been buying protection, Tommy replied. If you'd gone to the local cops with this, Morrison would have buried the entire case. Suddenly, Gloria's arrogance made sense. She wasn't just cheating and stealing, she believed she was untouchable. So, what do we do? I asked. We go federal, Tommy said. Once that money crossed state lines into offshore accounts, this stopped being a local issue. The FBI doesn't answer to crooked small-town detectives. That afternoon, I met FBI Special Agent Sarah Martinez in a coffee shop about an hour from town. I laid everything out. The financial fraud, forged signatures, the second mortgage, Morrison's involvement, Marcus's role. Agent Martinez listened closely, taking notes. Mr. Donahue, what you've uncovered is substantial. This goes beyond your marriage. What are you saying? Marcus Webb and Detective Morrison are already on our radar for real estate fraud, she explained. Your wife may have walked into something far bigger than an affair. She and Marcus have just handed us pieces we were missing. Martinez told me they were tracking a network of corrupt officials and real estate players specializing in property theft and money laundering. My marriage was just one casualty of their scheme. We're going to need you to act like nothing's wrong for a few more days, Agent Martinez said. Can you manage that? I nodded. What happens to Gloria? That depends entirely on how cooperative she decides to be, Martinez replied. That evening, Gloria cheerfully announced she'd be heading out of town for a spa weekend with some girlfriends, leaving Thursday, back Sunday. Sounds relaxing, I said, fully aware she was planning to meet Marcus and finalize their escape. You don't mind? She seemed genuinely surprised at how calm I was. You deserve a break, I replied. Take all the time you need. I watched her pack her new luggage, slipping in documents she assumed I hadn't seen. Bank details, flight confirmations, even a fake passport with her photo and a different name. Thursday morning, I kissed her goodbye at the door and watched her car pull away. She thought she was driving toward a new life. In reality, she was heading straight into a federal sting operation that would obliterate everything she'd plotted with Marcus. As soon as her car disappeared around the corner, I called Agent Martinez. She's on the move, I said. Whatever you're doing, now's the moment. It's already in motion, Martinez answered. Mr. Donahue, you may want to keep your phone close. Things are about to get complicated. Friday afternoon, she called back with the final setup. Francis, we intercepted messages between Gloria and Marcus. They're meeting tonight at Ocean View Restaurant on Harbor Street. They think they're toasting their escape. That's 3 blocks from my mother-in-law's place, I said. Perfect. We're going to need witnesses for what happens next. I phoned Elizabeth and walked her through the plan. Her voice was calm, almost resigned, despite everything she'd learned about her daughter. Francis, I've been turning this over in my mind all week, she said. If Gloria's father were still alive, he'd be horrified at what she's become. We tried to raise her right, but somewhere along the road, she lost her way. Elizabeth, I need you to invite Gloria to dinner tonight, I said. Tell her you want to talk about something important regarding the family. She'll smell a trap, Elizabeth replied. Not if you mention you've been having chest pains and want to see her before you go in for tests, I said quietly. She won't ignore that. That evening, I walked into the Ocean View restaurant and saw Elizabeth already seated at a table, with Gloria's brother, Michael, and his wife Sarah, waiting for the show to begin. They looked tense but resolute. Gloria had agreed to dinner, believing her mother was dealing with serious health problems. At 7:30 sharp, she walked into the restaurant expecting some kind of family medical emergency. Instead, she found me at a table with her mother, her brother Michael, and his wife Sarah, and a neat stack of manila envelopes. The expression on her face was unforgettable. That confident mask she always wore just cracked. Francis, what are you doing here? Her voice wobbled. Sit down, I said evenly. We need to talk. Mom, what's going on? Gloria stayed on her feet, clutching her designer purse to her chest like a shield. Elizabeth spoke first. Gloria, Francis has shown me some very troubling information about what you've been doing lately. I set an envelope in front of each person at the table. Don't open them yet, I said. I want Gloria to explain first. Explain what? Gloria's pitch climbed, her tone turning sharp and defensive. Where you been getting the money for this new lifestyle? I said quietly. The $200,000 you stole by forging my signature on loan documents? The color drained from her face. That's insane. You're being paranoid again. Michael tore open his envelope anyway and stared at the pages inside. Gloria, these are bank records, he breathed. You really did this. I can explain, Gloria started, but I raised my hand. You told me not to be jealous when you walked out on your date, I said, my voice carrying farther than I intended. Well, I'm not jealous anymore. I'm just disappointed that 22 years meant so little to you. That was the moment she truly froze, understanding that I knew everything. Right then, Agent Sarah Martinez stepped up to our table, displaying her badge. Gloria Donahue, you're under arrest for bank fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. As the cuffs clicked around her wrists, Gloria finally looked at me with something that almost resembled the woman I'd once married. Francis, please. We can fix this. We can still... No, I cut in. We could have, before you decided to destroy everything we built. Saturday morning brought news that the whole operation was collapsing. Agent Martinez called while I was having coffee with Elizabeth, who'd insisted on staying close after the arrest. Francis, we've taken 6 people in the network into custody, including Detective Morrison, she said. Your wife's cooperation led us to accounts in 3 different countries. What did she tell you? I asked. Everything, Martinez replied. Marcus Webb has been running a sophisticated scam targeting small business owners all over the Southeast. They've been at it for 5 years. You were just the latest target. Elizabeth set her cup down with a faint clink. Agent Martinez, how many families did they destroy? 23 that we know of so far, Martinez answered. Your daughter's testimony is helping us reach all the victims. My stomach twisted thinking of the other men who'd lived through the same nightmare. Marriages blown apart by calculated greed instead of simple mistakes. There's something else, Martinez added. Marcus planned to kill you, Francis, and stage it as a diving accident. Your wife refused to go along with that, which is why they've fast-tracked the financial side instead. Silence fell like a weight. Elizabeth grabbed my hand, her eyes wet. He was going to murder my son-in-law. The plan, Martinez continued, was to empty the accounts, make your death look like a tragic accident, and have Gloria inherit everything as the grieving widow. She would have vanished within a month with a new identity. I stared out at the harbor where I'd spent 15 years building my business. How close did they get? Marcus had already acquired the equipment to sabotage your dive gear, she said. If you hadn't uncovered the affair when you did, you likely wouldn't be alive right now. That afternoon, I went to see Gloria at the county jail. She sat across the glass from me in an orange jumpsuit, looking smaller and older than I'd ever seen her. I never agreed to the murder, she said softly. That's why I tried to tell you about the affair. I thought if you divorced me, Marcus would back off. You could have just told me the truth, I replied. I was scared, she whispered. Marcus said if I betrayed him, he'd kill both of us. Her voice cracked. I know that doesn't excuse what I did, but I felt trapped. I studied her face, searching for any trace of the woman I'd shared my life with for more than 2 decades. The prosecutor says you could be looking at 15 years if you fully cooperate, I told her. I know, Gloria said. I'm going to testify against every one of them. It won't undo what I did to you, but maybe it'll help the other families. As I walked out of the jail, I felt something unexpected. Not forgiveness, but a kind of release. She had crossed almost every line, but she'd refused to cross that final one. That evening, Tommy called with the last missing piece. Francis, the FBI's managed to recover most of your money, he said. The offshore accounts have been frozen, and the funds are being returned to the victims. You might actually come out of this okay financially. What about Deep Blue Adventures? I asked. The shop is yours, he said. The forged mortgage is invalidated, and the insurance company is covering your legal expenses. You can rebuild. For the first time in weeks, I felt like my lungs worked properly again. 3 months after Gloria's arrest, I stood on the deck of my boat, watching the sun climb over the Atlantic. Deep Blue Adventures was back in business, and bookings were actually better than before. Apparently, people respected a man who'd been through fire and hadn't broken. Elizabeth had become an unlikely anchor in my life. She'd taken over Gloria's old office at the dive center, handling reservations and customer service. Her presence softened the empty space where 22 years of partnership had once been, even if that partnership had turned out to be built on lies. "Francis, you've got a visitor," Elizabeth called from the office window. I looked up to see a woman in her 30s walking down the pier. Professional suit, steady stride, and something familiar in her features. "Mr. Donahue, I'm Rebecca Martinez," she said, offering her hand. "Sarah Martinez's sister. I run a victim advocacy organization for financial fraud cases." I shook her hand, noticing the resemblance. "What can I do for you, Ms. Martinez?" "We're putting together a support network for people harmed by Marcus Webb's operation," she explained. 23 families lost everything because of that ring. They need to hear from someone who came out the other side. The idea struck a chord. These men had suffered the same blows I had. The betrayal, the financial ruin, the way you start doubting every memory of your life. "What would that involve?" I asked. "Speaking at meetings, sharing your story, showing them that recovery is possible," Rebecca said. "A lot of these guys are thinking about ending their lives, Francis. They feel like total failures." That afternoon, I attended my first support group session at a community center in Raleigh. There were 12 men in the room, aged somewhere between their mid-30s and 60, all wearing the same haunted look I'd seen in my own reflection 3 months earlier. "Gentlemen, this is Francis Donahue," Rebecca said. "His wife was involved in Marcus Webb's network, but he managed to expose the operation and recover his assets." A man named David spoke up first. "How did you even know something was wrong?" he asked. "I lived with my wife for 8 years and never suspected a thing." "I didn't know," I admitted. "I got lucky. My wife slipped up, and I had the right friends in the right places. But more than anything, I refused to let the betrayal shut down my ability to think clearly." Another man, Robert, raised his eyes from his hands. "They took my construction company, my house, my kids' college money. Everything I built over 15 years is gone." "The FBI recovered about 70% of what they stole from you," I said. "You'll get most of it back." "That's not what I meant," another man cut in. "I'm talking about trust. How do you ever believe anyone again?" That was the question I'd been wrestling with myself. "You don't start with trust," I said. "You start with verification. You let people earn your trust through consistent actions over time, slowly, carefully. That's how you rebuild it." After the meeting, Robert came over to me privately. "Francis, I heard your mother-in-law helped expose her own daughter," he said. "That must have been brutal for your family." "Elizabeth chose what was right over what was easy," I replied. "That's the kind of person you can trust, someone who's willing to do the hard thing when it actually matters." That evening, I called Elizabeth to tell her about the support group. "Francis, I'm proud of you for helping those men," she said. "Gloria destroyed a lot of lives, but you're helping rebuild them." "We're helping rebuild them," I corrected her. "I couldn't do any of this without you." When I hung up, it hit me. The web of lies that had surrounded my marriage was slowly being replaced by a network built on honesty and mutual support. That felt like real progress. 6 months after the arrests, I got an unexpected phone call that shifted everything again. "Francis, this is Captain Jennifer Walsh with the Coast Guard Investigative Service," the voice said. "We need your expertise on a case involving underwater evidence recovery." "What kind of case?" I asked. "Marcus Webb wasn't just running financial scams," she said. "We've uncovered evidence that he was using diving operations to move drugs along the coast. We need someone with your technical diving background and investigative experience." The irony was almost poetic. The skills Marcus had tried to use against me were now being used to dismantle his wider empire. That afternoon, I met Captain Walsh at the Coast Guard station. She showed me underwater footage of sealed containers strapped to artificial reefs, the same reefs where I had been teaching diving for 15 years. "We believe Webb's network has been using recreational dive sites as drop points," Walsh explained. "They'd stash contraband underwater during legitimate dive trips and pick it up later." "What do you need from me?" I asked. "Someone who knows these waters intimately and can spot anything that doesn't belong," she said. "Someone the local diving community already trusts." I studied the video and recognized several familiar locations. The idea that smugglers had been operating in my backyard while I cheerfully taught families how to enjoy the ocean made my blood boil. When do we start? I asked. The investigation lasted 3 weeks. Using Deep Blue Adventures as a cover, I led Coast Guard dive teams to suspicious sites while keeping the shop's day-to-day operations looking normal. We uncovered 17 hidden caches packed with cocaine, heroin, and illegal weapons. The final breakthrough came when we discovered Marcus's personal dive logs tucked away in a waterproof container. They detailed 5 years of smuggling runs, listed corrupt harbor officials, and recorded the bribes he'd paid to law enforcement. "Francis, this is going to bring down the entire coastal smuggling ring," Captain Walsh said as we surfaced from that last dive. "You've just helped us close cases that stretch across multiple states." That evening, Elizabeth and I sat on the deck of the dive center, watching the sunset turn the water gold. "Your father would be proud," she said. "You took something terrible and turned it into a chance to help other people." "Gloria's father, you mean?" I asked. "No, Francis, your father," she said. "He raised a man who stands up for what's right, even when it's hard." I thought about that for a long time. My dad died while I was still in the Navy. He never got to see me start Deep Blue Adventures or marry Gloria. Maybe he would have been proud of how I handled all of this. "Elizabeth, I've been thinking about expanding the business," I said. "Adding a victim advocacy angle, partnering with law enforcement on marine investigations." "That sounds perfect," she replied. "You've finally found what you were meant to do." 2 weeks later, the local paper ran a feature on Deep Blue Adventures' role in exposing the smuggling network. The headline read, "Local dive instructor helps Coast Guard. Bust multi-state drug ring bookings doubled almost overnight." Apparently, people liked learning to dive from someone whose character had been pressure tested. More importantly, I'd found a new purpose. The betrayal that nearly broke me had revealed strengths I never realized I had. 1 year after Gloria's arrest, I stood in a federal courtroom listening to the judge deliver her sentence. 15 years for fraud, conspiracy, and racketeering. Marcus Webb received life without parole for conspiracy to commit murder and drug trafficking. Detective Morrison was handed 25 years for corruption and evidence tampering. Elizabeth sat beside me, her hand resting firmly on my arm as the verdicts were read. Her daughter's decisions had torn their family apart, but Elizabeth had chosen justice over blind loyalty. "The court acknowledges that Mrs. Donahue's cooperation was crucial in dismantling this criminal enterprise," Judge Harrison said. "However, the seriousness of these offenses requires a substantial sentence." Gloria turned to look at us one last time before the bailiff led her away. I didn't see the woman I'd married or the calculating stranger who'd betrayed me, just a person whose choices had shattered countless lives, including her own. After the sentencing, Agent Martinez joined us in the courthouse hallway. "Francis, the final asset recovery is complete," she said. "Between the offshore accounts and the properties we seized, we've recovered 87% of the stolen funds for all victims." "What about the other 13? I asked. "Gone," she admitted. "But this is still the highest recovery rate we've ever achieved in a case this complicated." Later that afternoon, Elizabeth and I returned to Deep Blue Adventures. The business had grown far beyond anything I ever imagined during my marriage. We now owned 3 boats, employed 8 instructors, and held standing contracts with both the Coast Guard and the FBI for underwater investigative work. "Francis, I have something to tell you," Elizabeth said as we watched the sunset from the office deck. "I've been accepted into the Police Academy's Civilian Investigator program." I turned to her, stunned. "Elizabeth, you're 62. "Exactly," she said with a smile. "I have life experience those younger investigators don't, and someone needs to help families navigate what comes after financial crimes." The idea of my former mother-in-law becoming a criminal investigator sounded surreal at first, but the more I thought about it, the more it fit. She had shown unshakable integrity when it mattered the most. "Does this mean you're leaving Deep Blue Adventures?" I asked. "Not leaving," she replied. "Expanding. Imagine a dive center that also offers victim advocacy and financial crime consultation." That evening, I called Rebecca Martinez to discuss adding victim services to our business model. "Francis, you're building something unique," Rebecca said. "A business that survived a criminal assault and transformed itself into a force for justice. That's powerful." When I hung up, I realized something strange. Gloria's betrayal had accidentally created the foundation of something meaningful. Deep Blue Adventures was no longer just a dive shop. It was living proof that honest people could withstand sophisticated attacks and emerge stronger. My marriage might have been built on illusions, but everything I'd built from its ashes was real. 2 years after Gloria's conviction, I stood on the deck of our newest boat, the Truth Seeker, watching a new dive student complete her equipment checks. She was nervous, but determined, the same combination needed for both diving and recovery from betrayal. Her name was Amanda Wells, a marine biologist who'd lost her entire research grant to a romance scammer 6 months earlier. She'd joined our victim support program and decided diving would help her rebuild her confidence. "Mr. Donahue, I'm still afraid I'll panic underwater," she said, adjusting her mask. "Fear is healthy," I told her. "It keeps you alert. The goal isn't to eliminate fear, it's to function effectively despite it." Elizabeth emerged from the cabin with updated certification paperwork. At 63, she had completed both police academy training and advanced diving certification. Together, we now offered something no other business could: underwater investigation services paired with victim advocacy. "Amanda, you're going to love the reef system," Elizabeth said. "Francis found 3 new artificial reefs last month during a Coast Guard investigation. Those reefs were made from materials confiscated from Marcus Webb's smuggling operation. Turning instruments of crime into habitats for marine life felt like poetic justice." As we descended into the clear blue water, I watched Amanda's confidence strengthen with every breath she took. Underwater, you can't fake composure. You either trust your equipment and training, or you don't survive. After the dive, Amanda sat on the deck with tears in her eyes. "I haven't felt that peaceful in months," she said. "Down there, nothing mattered except the present moment." "That's why I love this work," I told her. "The ocean doesn't care about your past. It only responds to who you are right now." That evening, Elizabeth and I reviewed applications for our new fellowship program, free dive training, and business mentorship for victims of financial crime. 43 applications this month, Elizabeth said. "Francis, we're changing lives. We're giving people tools to rebuild. They're the ones doing the real work," I said. My phone buzzed with a message from Agent Martinez. "Francis, the web network trial in Florida resulted in 17 more convictions. Your testimony was critical. Thank you for seeing this through." As I typed my response, I reflected on how completely my life had been transformed. 2 years earlier, I'd been a betrayed husband discovering the truth about his marriage. Now, I ran a business that helped others recover from similar wounds, while supporting law enforcement with complex marine investigations. The doorbell rang. Elizabeth answered it and came back holding an envelope. "It's from the State Attorney General's office," she said. Inside was an official commendation recognizing Deep Blue Adventures for exceptional service in combating organized crime and supporting victims of financial fraud. "Look at this," Elizabeth said, pointing at the letterhead. "They're recommending us for a federal contract with the Justice Department." I stared at the document, thinking about the journey that had carried me here. Gloria's betrayal had nearly broken me, but it had also revealed strengths I hadn't known I possessed. "Elizabeth, do you ever regret helping me expose Gloria?" I asked quietly. She met my gaze, steady and unwavering, the same look that had carried me through my darkest year. "Francis, I regret that my daughter became someone who needed exposing," she said, "but I'll never regret doing what was right." As we watched the last light fade over the harbor, I felt something I thought was gone forever. Absolute certainty in the people beside me and in the work we were building together. The water had taught me something profound. Trust is like diving. It demands courage, preparation, and the willingness to go deep. But when you find the right people and the right purpose, the depths become a place of discovery, not danger.